Great. Okay, we'll call the Wilton Board of Education to order on October 13th. First order of business is to review and approve the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. It's now time at the beginning of each meeting to give an opportunity for members of the public to speak if they so wish. Is there anyone that would like to speak? No. We'll move on to the consent agenda. This is the minutes and personnel changes. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I have one question. On the minutes from the meeting I was at last, so that was 2 meetings ago.
Yes.
I don't know if we got them, but I asked for like an early read of the attendance, who's signed up.
It was in the packet that you received on Friday.
Friday.
All the minutes. The minutes from the last.
Right. But I asked for the early read on the attendance. I know we're going to get the report in November.
Oh, the attendance.
The enrollment.
The enrollment. That was. I think we got.
You did.
We got showing who was. I think it was the first 2 days. I believe there was the.
It wasn't by class or anything. Well, there was an AP.
Yeah. No, I think it was.
It was the spreadsheet, the same spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I think it was early.
I don't think we did.
I think there was an enrollment report at the end of Ken's financial
Yeah,
at the last
exactly.
meeting.
That's right.
Yeah.
I will send you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. That's
That's
Okay.
right. It was.
Good. So.
I may have missed it. I apologize because
Okay.
I wasn't last meeting.
Not a problem. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
And all in favor? Aye. Okay. Move on to reports and recognition. Just a brief report from me, and as I've done, I'd like to continue to just let the public know when we will be getting presentations on various subjects throughout the fall. And so I'd like to say that on October 27th, that'll be our next meeting, we'll be receiving a presentation on enrollment projections. Then on November 10th, we'll be looking into the district testing report. On November 22nd, we'll consider the class size report. And then on December 8th, which is also the organizational meeting, we'll be looking at the technology plan and the facilities report. And then, of course, we'll start the budget season around December 15th. Well, we'll certainly be starting that before then, but on December 15th, we'll get the first budget workshop on the recommendations for the superintendent. And with that, I will turn it over to the superintendent.
Good evening. Last week, our last meeting, I reported that the Miller Driscoll was going to receive an award from the United States Department of Agriculture. There was an award ceremony held this week at Miller Driscoll, and the school did receive a very nice plaque and a huge banner from the Department of Agriculture, and a check for $500 is in the mail, we're told. We did not see the hard cash. But this award recognizes that schools have created healthier school environments through improvements in the foods and nutrition and physical education. So it's really an emphasis on promoting healthy lifestyles. At the ceremony, there were representatives from Chartwell's. There were the Chartwell's people from our district were there. Some of the employees at Miller Driscoll, the food service employees. The nice part was they got recognized for their efforts because they're the ones dealing directly with the students, and Cheryl and her administrative team. So it was a very nice informal kind of a celebration at Miller Driscoll. Second item, you may remember, the board may remember last spring we had a wonderful presentation from a group of young boys from Cider Mill School who had a vision that they were calling Bottled Up. And they gave a report to the board about what they planned to do. They subsequently went on and advertised their vision at the Go Green Festival in May. And they've started a Facebook page. And I think they say they have 60 followers or something. So they're very excited about that. And they pledged, I think the important part of it is they pledged not only to do things to improve the environment, but to raise money for the Schools Foundation. And I'm pleased to report that at Tuesday's WEF trustees meeting, they reported they had collected over 10,000 bottles, and which amounts to $500. And so they gave a $500 check to the foundation. All of this work was undertaken by just 6 boys. So, I mean, 10,000 bottles, 6 kids is quite a deal. They are Madden Hervé, Louis Cropper, Matthew McVeigh, Paul Martinez, Trevor Martinez, and Will Maggio. Their plan is to start bottled up chapters in each of our schools. I'm glad this has an environmental orientation. I hope people don't take that the wrong way. But they're going to do it in each school, and they've been talking or will be talking with our principals in ways that they can collaborate with each school to gather recyclables. And they're also considering doing a community-wide drive. So it was very nice. I missed that part of the presentation Tuesday night. They did a nice job, I'm told. In terms of with respect to the Education Foundation, the evening was a very full agenda. Tech Director Matt Hepper gave a terrific presentation on the use of smart boards. You may recall the foundation was instrumental in giving us money, along with PTAs, to purchase some smart boards. And he talked not only about the equipment that was purchased, but the training that was partly subsidized by the foundation, but also the efforts that we've done in our schools, the work throughout the year with the instructional leaders in the schools, the use of staff development days to try and promote, expand the appropriate use of this technology. There was a lot of conversation about the revamping. There's a wonderful new member of our of the WEF board who's a technology guru, and that's his business. I think he's in marketing of some sort, and he's revamping the website, and it's not ready to go up yet, but it's going to be quite an extraordinary website, I'm told. So he was talking about it using terms that many of us didn't know much about, which we'll be learning. They talked about their final preparations. They're about ready to go out with their annual appeal letter, which is a big effort for them, and that will go out, I believe, around the time of the next meeting in November. I think that goes out. So they're in the final stages of that. And they talked about next week's Read Aloud Day and a concert that Scott Weber is going to be and others are going to be performing at the Wilton Public Library, starting at 6 on the night of the CABE convention, which is November 18th, Friday, November 18th. I think one of the things, and several of you were there last year, we talked, the foundation made a real effort to reach out to try and attract new volunteers. They've done so. And that energizes the group further. And what they want to make sure everybody understands that the volunteer jobs at the foundation can be broken into manageable bites, because a lot of what happens, as you all know, since you're volunteers and you volunteer in other groups too, is that some of the jobs you're competing for the same talent, and so they want to try to recruit people who are willing to just take a small job. We really appreciate, I know the board has repeatedly expressed appreciation to the foundation for what it does for us in technology, staff development, and the arts. And so real thanks again to Kit Smith, the chair, and a really energetic group. It was a great meeting, so very energized. The next thing I want to report on very quickly is the Cider Mill Walkathon. The Cider Mill held its second annual walkathon Wednesday morning. And I'm told it was a huge success with incredible support from the parents and students and staff. The student body completed 4 laps on the Wilton High Track, which is for me a year's worth, as the culmination of the school's PTA fundraiser. Leading up to the walkathon, students collected donations from family members, and I'm told they raised more than $43,000. About 94% of the Cider Mill parents, families had contributed money to this undertaking. So they'd like to thank the PTA and the parent volunteers who helped make this walkathon so successful. Last year, a portion of the PTA had supported, as they did at some other schools, some of the smart boards that were purchased. So we're very appreciative for what the PTAs do for not only Cider Mill, but for all of our schools. The last item I had was one I received some information on one of our star debaters here tonight, Simon Brewer. I'm pleased to report that the Wilton won the Yale Parliamentary Tournament, which was held late September 25th. Senior Simon Brewer and Will Jankowski did a superb job against excellent teams from Boston all the way to Pittsburgh. So it was quite a gathering of talent. Simon and Will competed in a very excellent way against great teams in both the final and I'm told the championship round. Sophomore Allie Heisted and her partner Peter Jensen won all the way up to the semifinals, where they lost to the team that Simon and Will defeated. So Warriors had their way the second go-round at this team. Junior Allie Schaefer and her partner Eleanor Clifford also broke through to the final rounds. So three Wilton teams broke through. No other school in the competition had more than one team break through. That tournament and the breakthrough performance by our debaters is a really big deal in the high school debate circles. Just really quickly, the form of debate is an interesting one. There are lots of different formats, as you may know, that debates take. The debating teams are given the topics 20 minutes before the round, and they go 5 rounds plus final rounds, and they have 20 minutes to prepare, and I'm told the only reference materials they are allowed is a copy of the United States Constitution and a dictionary, and they may not consult with their coaches or advisors when they flip a coin to choose sides. And so it's a style which doesn't encourage or reward rapid speaking, factoid rendering, which we see in some other debates that are televised from time to time, but really focuses on well-reasoned, carefully presented arguments. And this is coming from a person who's argued for the United States Supreme Court. Simon and Will are very persuasive advocates with much passion when fitting or required, particularly, I'm told, on the First Amendment issues that they argue. And this person talked about they have a wonderful ability to work together to construct well-structured presentations and arguments on the fly. When you think about 20 minutes to construct an entire debate, is pretty great. So again, the debate is encouraged and supported from 8th grade on in the school system, and really congratulations to Simon and his fellow debate team members and their advisor, Wilton High School Library Media Specialist Barbara Lyons. So well done, Simon.
Let's stand up. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, we'll move on to the committee reports.
I have one. We're getting the technology going here. This is on the legal services. Bruce Likely and I were appointed as the Board of Education subcommittee to review the legal services provided to the board and the district by the board's current legal counsel, Shipman and Goodwin. And our approach, which was approved by the board, was to first determine what legal services Shipman and Goodwin provided to us, and then determine the level of satisfaction with those services. To that end, we prepared an evaluation survey that was sent to those people in the position to have the most interaction with the legal counsel. And that would be the board members, the central office administrators, and the principals. And I have to thank everyone who responded to the survey for their time and their effort and the thought that they put into their responses. We sent the survey out. It was approved in June, and then it was sent out by email on September 26th with responses due last Friday. On Sunday afternoon, I sat down and compiled and analyzed the responses. I've sent everyone the compilation of the responses and all the comments. The response rate was very high. And I've prepared a bar chart that shows what the responses were. Along the bottom were the 4 possible, or the 6 possible responses for each category. 12 people evaluated the law firm in 18 categories, so there were a total of 216 ratings. And this bar bar chart shows that the ratings were overwhelmingly positive. 93% of the respondents gave the law firm a rating of at expectation, above expectation, or superior. And within that group, 80% of them gave a ranking of superior. So what the survey showed us is that there is very strong support for the quality and the value of the legal counsel that Shipman and Goodwin provides the district and the board. The respondents noted that there were numerous areas of strength, but there were also a few areas where there was a need for an improvement. And so we will follow up with Shipman and Goodwin on any of the needs improvement rankings. And we haven't quite decided if it's going to be the chairman alone or the chairman and the legal subcommittee that will have that conversation with the team that represents Wilton. But in keeping with the Board of Education's commitment to transparency and keeping the public informed, this chart that's now on the screen will be posted on the district website for the public to see.
I think it's important to note, too, that the areas of needs improvement that might overstate it, there were areas of suggested improvement for greater efficiency.
Yes.
In general, I think what we saw was we're very happy with the work that they give us, and even though they may not be the least expensive firm out there, for the work that they give us good value. So I think it was a worthwhile exercise.
Well, I think the board thanks you because we went through some issues getting into this, but I think you've done an excellent job, and it was truly an opportunity to review how the administration and the board feels about the law firm. So I think it was well done. Thank you very much.
I think it was a good exercise for Bruce and I. We initially approached it differently, and then we were able to come to consensus on what the best way to do it would be.
Talking helps. Any other committee reports?
I just had one question on your report. So what's the next step?
Next step is to decide who's going to meet with Shipman and Goodwin, and then set up a meeting with them and go over the areas that were where there was an indication that there might be some need for improvement in the way they deliver the services to us.
Now, as I understood, this whole conversation started about maybe comparing the rates of other firms and kind of moved into an evaluation. So am I to understand now that we're not going to compare the rates to other firms in this business?
I think what we found is that the rates are just one part of the overall evaluation, and yes, we did notice that they're not the least expensive out there, but also found through the process that they provide good value. That was one of the areas that it's worthwhile having a conversation with them about.
Yeah.
But there were some other areas too, as far as communication tools, those kinds of things. So I think it'd be fair for us to have more of a dialogue if you have any questions.
And some of the efficiencies that were suggested would be cost saving.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the process changes that were suggested would be cost saving.
Right.
We just have to sit down with them and talk about what might be feasible.
Is there any thought of going back and asking to renegotiate their fee to a more market-based rate? I think when we looked at this before, the rates for senior attorneys were upwards of $300, and their competition was in the low twos. So that's a fairly large discrepancy.
We have not had that conversation with them. I think at one point the superintendent did have that conversation with them.
And they had held their rates flat for I think there were 2 years, and then they had increased somewhat. Again, I think the issue, but no, they did not drop their rates as a result of the conversation. I think the issue with rates is that it's difficult to in a simple spreadsheet way to compare the rates because different firms charge. It's not just the hourly rate of the senior partner or whoever you're working with. It's how they bill you, whether it's driving to and from the office. It's other, and Karen, I think you had spoken to other kinds of ways that firms bill. What they bill on their support services is a variable. So there's several factors which are factored into the rate. The analysis that you may recall that we did before also showed that we had very little of our work done by the senior partner. Now it's going to be different this year because we're in a major negotiations with the teachers. He had done very little in the year we analyzed or work for us relative to the other members of his department. So a lot of work had been done by less senior people and less expensive people.
I think part of what we were trying to get at in the evaluation as well were the questions about value, tying back to the administrators who hold that responsibility within their own portion of the budget. So within each of the schools, within the different departments, and they were an integral part in doing this evaluation. So we were in effect asking them in their cherished budget dollars do they view this as a worthwhile use of their funds? And it appeared that the response back was yes.
I mean, for instance, there was one suggestion that that more of the professional development that the law firm provides be done by webinar or video conferencing rather than having them travel to the district. And I can see where there would be a significant savings if we could transition them to do that.
Right, and that was an administrator who brought that up too. It wasn't a board member. It was a great suggestion.
So the answer is we're not going out to bid and we're not going to ask them to reduce the rates. Is that correct?
I didn't see that as being part of this, no.
Now, there was a financial part of the evaluation, but I think, as Bruce said, our conclusion was, given the responses that we received on the evaluation, was that we were receiving good value for what we were paying for.
But we don't know whether we get like value from another provider. That's fine.
No.
We don't know that.
We do not know that.
Well, I think one point on that, not to drag this out, is that the administrators, there are several of us here who've worked with several of the leading firms that we were comparing against. And I have to tell you, as one member of many who did this survey, I could not have given the kind of ratings that I gave in this case to the other firms. So for me, it was a matter of, and there were some significant trade-offs, and so many of us have had experiences that were totally alien to the kinds of quality that we are different from the kind of quality we get with Shipman and Goodwin in terms of the responsiveness, the time that various firms took to get back to people, the fact that some firms were so overcommitted that we're in a very time-sensitive business, as are many businesses, and just the overall quality. And again, we'd all had experiences that were far from satisfactory, so that factored in, I think, to our thinking, having experienced these firms. So,
as you read through the comments at the end of the evaluation, you'll see that more than one administrator expressed that sentiment.
Additionally to that, too, in our bylaws, Karen pointed out that it's our responsibility to do this evaluation every year. And so our relationship with the law firm is on a year-by-year basis. And while we have the opportunity to make that change, when our feelings are that their value is so high relative to what we're paying, and when we're in such challenging times legally in the work that they're doing for us, right now it may not make sense to do that. Next year may be another day. The year after that may be another day.
Well, the board will have the opportunity to speak with the senior partner as a result of these. Well, the board, either the committee or perhaps the committee and me will have the opportunity to speak with the senior partner about this. And I think going through the exercise has given us a better appreciation for the multiple things that they do, areas of weakness, and we can discuss them all just as we go through an evaluation, face to face.
Good job.
So we will report back to you once that meeting has been set up.
Are there any other committee reports? No? All right. Well, each year we have budget assumptions that we use as a basis for compiling the budget and provide a foundation for going forward, looking at the budget, those areas that we should be considering. And we have some suggested language in front of us. So.
One of the things before we start going through these that drove our thinking this year, one of the factors was something we had talked about as last year after the fact a little bit, is the importance of tying our budget more concretely to the strategic plan. And so rather than, because in truth, looking at our assumptions, because many of them have over the years have been fairly similar. Conditions hadn't changed that much. The issues that were outlined in the assumptions hadn't changed. But this year we've taken a rather different approach and tried to craft some language that incorporates the strategic plan into and some of the verbiage of the strategic plan into the assumptions. So we thought it was a different way of looking at it and something which reinforced one of our goals of further embedding the strategic plan into the culture of the district. And I think if you say these are things that you're strategically working on, then it makes, in our view, it made sense to try and show assumptions which fit some of the strategic initiatives and objectives that we have. So, having said that, have Ken and Tim kind of walk us through a little bit.
Well, to take you through the document, you may recognize the paragraph that begins the budget assumption work as the then statement from the strategic plan. You may recall there are 6 if statements. So we felt it appropriate to reaffirm the grand conclusion of the strategic plan as an introduction to this document. And then the bullets that appear below that in terms of sufficient resources, continuous improvement, flexibility, facility work, and of course the all-important represents value in the eyes of the community is verbiage taken from the budget strand of the strategic plan. The other factors, of course, that we certainly feel are most essential to the development of our coming budget cycle to support the organizational structures we have in place, the all-important and probably in some sectors people would argue the most important attribute is to maintain the high-quality faculty and staff that comprises the Wilton Public Schools, and doing that in a culture of professional development. The all-important conversations around class size, which you know have dominated our conversations here over the past few years. The idea that we are going to promote a 21st century oriented, rigorous, and relevant curriculum, which requires of our teachers to implement best practices in instruction and assessment. The need to recognize the importance of technology as being vital to the process of teaching and learning. The board's obligation to meet the various federal and state mandates, contractual obligations, and funding requirements that are found in the policies and practices of our school system. So, in effect, we think this is highly aligned with the language in the strategic plan. I think it brings greater relevance to that process, which, as you know, we're in year 2, and provides a framework for the development of the budget that we hope the board will support. The only other comment we wanted to make is you may be, at this moment in time, thinking about the correlation between this document and prior years as it relates to the budget assumptions that have been developed in the past. And indeed, I want to reassure the board that if you were to compare the 2 documents, you'd see there's a high correlation between the language of last year and this year. It's just, we engaged as a group of central office administrators in really trying to connect the dots of this process to the strategic plan work.
I would echo that. I sat down and looked at that, and the thing that jumped out at me is last year, and I think the year before, we had an assumption that the budget that we would prepare and present would take into consideration the economic climate and the needs of the community as well as the needs of the schools. And having sat on the budget subcommittee here, the line that says represents value in the eyes of the community is that same thought. If a budget represents value in the eyes of the community, then it's one that meets the needs of all players in the community.
And it speaks to the recognition and the importance that we obviously place on the extent to which we earn the respect and the ability of taxpayers in this town to in effect support what we do. So to try to affirm that in a positive way, we talked about value.
I must say, I'm delighted to see the strategic plan integrate or fitting so closely with this document. I do have a question as to whether your plan is to take us back to the Middle Ages in the year 1013, but that's...
No, I'm sure you do not. I'm sure you do. Over and over.
Mr. Yabao, we always loved your wordsmithing. We wanted to make sure you're on top of
We
things.
planted that there for you.
Circled on mine, too.
That's great.
I'm sure Dr. Richards will be taking me out to the woodshed tomorrow.
I think that was me. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
I do have just one question. Most of if you look at the top 5 bullets, most of those are reflected in the second set of bullets in some way, or sort of grow out of that. I'm not sure I see that direct relationship in terms of the represents value in the eyes of the community. And I'm just wondering, and I throw it out on the table, whether we want to include something in that second set of bullets that says something to the effect of controls costs without compromising student learning and achievement, or something like that. Because these are budget assumptions, and I think it is very much part of our thinking. So that's it's a question. It's just something I throw out on the table. And the other one is just a personal issue, and I don't think it necessarily has to be in here. But I think the green initiative in town is important. I think we've made it a priority in the schools, and I would not be unhappy to see something to the effect of continues to invest in efforts to reduce energy consumption or something like that. Or integrate the green initiative into the operations of the school. And I don't think those are critical issues, but... Gary, I'm sorry.
A cost containment bullet kind of thing.
Something.
We've had it. It's not a lot of years we've had the and it does tie, the cost containment is always a theme of our presentation. So would that
Yes.
tie in? Is that? I don't know
Something-
the rest of
And
you
I think
feel
the
about
green
that.
initiative and the cost containment go hand in hand, because when you make the investment, you have a long-term operational cost decrease.
I'm okay with not spending the time and putting that in there and saving that money.
Tim, I have a question. What did we add or delete from last year? Could you compare and contrast? I see that you have both documents in front of you, and I don't.
There were 2 focused bullets from the prior document that in some quarters may not be specifically found in the newer document. One has already been brought forward just in the last few minutes around the ideas around cost containment. The language,
That's what I thought. I thought that
the
was
language
last
from
year.
last year is that the budget balances the needs and obligations of the school system with current economic realities. So it does speak to this idea of controlling costs, et cetera. That's one. The other is we had greater specificity around employee health benefits and the insurance reserve funding. That was specifically delineated in last year's document. We felt that was adequately covered in this final bullet, which talks about the obligation of the board to meet its policies and practices.
Operational thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, so we
Those
left
were the
one
two.
out and we put the cost containment back in. Okay.
I think you've done a nice job on it. I think we have a real challenge to hit that 5th bullet up at the top. Represents value in the eyes of the community. And we have our work cut out for us.
Absolutely.
You did a nice job on it, though.
Yeah, I'm really pleased.
Good.
Okay, well, we'll work on
Land that bullet and bring it back.
some language to, on the suggested.
We'll focus on 2013 as well.
Get us out of it.
Okay, any other comments?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't have a problem with the cost.
Thank you. No, I was joking about that. Right? Save you time.
Of course. Okay, so we'll move on to policy 5141.8, administration of medicines.
I hope everybody knows Barbara Shum, who is our nurse extraordinaire in the Wilton Public Schools. And so I invited Barbara to be with us tonight. We, in your packets, we also gave you tonight just some talking points about what has happened with this policy. As you can see, it's undergone massive changes. That's because of the regulations for state agencies and then medication administration rules have all changed significantly over the last 2 years. This has been an ongoing process for 2 years. And Barbara has really done yeoman's work in going to all the state meetings, all the state workshops, seminars, training on, excuse me, on, I need my water bottle. Sorry.
You're a nurse in the room.
Unfortunately, I'm not doing anything good. So Barbara worked very thoroughly through our current policy to try and incorporate all the new language. But the highlights, and actually as one of our notes here says, it was in effect as of October 1st, 2010. But no one could get it all done. So the state continued to run workshops and seminars all the way through this past summer and gave people extra time to work through their policies, get new forms developed because there's been a lot of new documentation that will be required on the part of the schools. Most of this work will fall on the nurses in the schools in terms of doing the training with staff, the record keeping, collecting authorizations for medication administration from providers and parents and all of those kinds of things. So we are hopeful that we will have this in place soon. So, but Barbara has really done an incredible amount of work, as you saw, in all the changes to the policy itself, all of which are required now under the law, much like all the massive changes that happened to the bullying policy. Is very similar in size. But the highlights are that it really broadened and expanded the policy to cover so many new aspects. And a lot of it was because these things were happening in the schools already, and requests were coming forward for kids to be able to administer their own medication in certain instances. Doctors were saying the kids can handle this. We ought to be able to let them do that. The need for training, the need for different authorizations to be acceptable from different kinds of providers and define who those were. This is the first state reg I ever saw with 3 pages of definitions that came with it, defining every single aspect of who is allowed to do what on what kind of medication. So the new regulations are broader, certainly, to include before and after school programs and school readiness, which we already had procedures in place for our before and after school programs that are really compliant with this policy. So that was not as much of a change for us as it might be for some other districts. New regulations on the administration of medications by coaches and athletic trainers during athletic events. There is a big dictionary now at the back of this policy with all the terms and definitions of providers, types of medication, required documentation, school events, functions, and so forth. It defines specifically who can be authorized to administer the medications, lays out the requirements for an appropriate student medication administration plan. Each student has to have a documented written plan that if we get a order from a physician or advanced practice nurse, the plan must be completed so that we have the record of how the medication is to be administered and by whom. Specifies who shall be trained in medication administration and what the content of the training will be. It introduces and specifies how students are authorized to self-administer and under what circumstances. It defines the correct practices for handling, storage, disposal of medications, and then provides the requirements for appropriate record keeping, documentation. There are about, I didn't include them in the packet, but about 6 or 8 new forms that Barbara has had to work on developing for the documentation. And then it defines responsibility and accountability. Here it is, for supervision of medication administration in the school. So really the senior nurse in the school will be the person responsible for the administration within their responsibilities. Behind the scenes, there has been a lot of work going on, revising and redesigning this policy. Barbara edited it first, and it came to me, and I edited as we were typing it and making the changes. And then all the forms and so on and so forth, and then working out plans and suggested ways to get the training accomplished with our staff. Right now, Barbara does, and all the nurses do training in their buildings for anybody who needs to. It's not, it's quite common that they do the training already for the staff who are involved in medication administration. This just puts in writing more of what has been happening already in a lot of places and in our schools in some cases. So we don't have a lot of wiggle room in terms of what we can change and alter because the state has been pretty clear once they finalized all the changes about how much of it we have to incorporate, which is all of it. But we certainly would like to take your questions or any questions that you might have.
I guess the first question would be, do you see any additional costs that this is going to impose on the district?
That's a very good question. Can I answer?
Yes,
that?
of course.
The only significant change we see is now that it has expanded who the qualified personnel that we can train would be: coaches, athletic trainers, before and after school program designate lead teachers, directors, whomever the director of the program would identify. Those are all before and after and around our scope of the contracted hours that we are in the building. And certainly conducting an in-depth training under our license to lay persons that we don't really see on a daily basis would not be doable during the course of the day when we're seeing the students, because our first priority is treating them. So training would have to take place around after school day, and that could, I would see, have to be compensated for in some way or form.
The way I read the policy, though, we're not mandated to train those individuals. It's just that if they are trained, they are then capable of administering that medication. Did you read it the same way?
For the before and after school school programs, it's the law says shall, which means must. But
Okay.
you're right and correct. It would be coaches and the athletic trainers, it's may.
Okay.
And that's up to the board to decide if that should be something that would be incorporated. It would be in a very rare circumstance, I would think, because most of these students in the interscholastic programs are of the age where they are self-carrying already in the districts. But if it's deemed that they are not capable of self-administering and the parent is requesting that the athletic trainer and or coach be trained and they take on that assignment, then that would be the nurses under her license to do that training.
Right. As a parent reading it, I liked it because it looked like it gave a lot more flexibility and therefore ability to dispense needed medications during the school day. So I was happy to read that. One of the questions that I had, though, and you brought up the administration plan, understanding that that's a written document, is that something that we can get in formalized format and put on the website so a parent, if they know they need to send their child to school with medication, can proactively download the form, fill it out with their physician, and save administrative time for you so that they can come into the school with everything in one
Once
package?
it's finished. It's almost finished.
Okay.
So, yes, we
Yes.
could do that.
Great.
That would be a great idea.
I have a question on the policy in the last paragraph,
The very last paragraph?
on the first page.
Oh. I was hoping we were done, Karen.
You seem to have taken out the requirement that there be written authorization from the physician and the parent or guardian yet it seems to be required under the regulations, and
Yes, oh, it should be in.
I was wondering if that was just an oversight.
Oh, so this piece maybe should not have been taken out. It was,
Karen, I thought that was in there in the
It's in
paragraph right above it,
Yeah.
Well, I wondered if
should
it
be,
was.
it should be in.
with the written order of an authorized prescriber.
there
It's
was a
written
lot of
authorization.
repetition of the phrases that
Yes.
include, and I want to do one more read-through of that to make sure we
That seemed
haven't.
to be the
I
one
think-
place where it wasn't repeated again.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Karen.
Yeah.
That's a place we've got to be very, very, very clear.
Right.
Um,
The other thing that seems to have fallen through the cracks on this is extracurriculars. The definition of an extracurricular activity means
What page are you on, Karen?
I'm on appendix.
Oh,
I'm in the appendix to A2, and it defines extracurricular as being outside the school day, not part of the educational program, and not before or after school.
mm-hmm.
And then school day means it excludes extracurricular activities. So I'm wondering if we have a child who you've got an EpiPen for who was in an extracurricular activity, how is that child protected? I mean, what do we do now with that sort of child?
Exactly, that's a total reversal of what we had been working on, that premise, but now they say that that program that's providing for that extracurricular has to come up with a safe accommodation plan between the parent and that program coordinator, because it does not come under our purview anymore.
What that means is that the parents often have to be
Right.
there and available, or if there is an emergency and there is no one there, we do call 911.
And I'm thinking of someplace like Cider Mill or, well, I'll use Cider Mill as an example because there are so many extracurriculars. Is there a coordinator of the morning extracurriculars and a coordinator of this afternoon extracurriculars, or does the parent have to go to the person who's in charge of the particular program that their child is involved in?
Depends on who's organizing the extracurricular. If it's done through continuing ed,
Okay.
continuing ed as part of the registration process always checks, and they must identify if the child has an allergy or a need for medication or an inhaler or EpiPen need or something like that. And then what we do is we look at whether or not the nurse is in the building at the time the program is being run. Is there staff there and available who have been trained in EpiPen use? It's a project to look at who might need assistance. But the backup is always to call 911 if there's an issue. And parents are told that there may not be a staff member in the building available for that extracurricular period, especially some of their programs that start at 7 in the morning, or their music programs and their basketball programs, that 911 could be called.
Okay.
You don't have any that starts that early. I see Catherine.
Yeah, we at 7 o'clock in the morning we have certified staff. The PE teachers would be having the intramurals.
Mm-hmm.
If we have tutorial work with our certified staff, extra help, for example, I can think of an instance where a parent brought in an additional EpiPen that would be given to the 5th grade teacher who's been trained. And the child also goes for strings extra help on another day. And the music teacher has been trained in the use of the EpiPen. So within the Cider Mill staff, if we touch that child after hours, we've all been trained, and that EpiPen will follow that child after school.
A question on the last paragraph on the first page. It says a coach of intramural and interscholastic athletics at the school and a licensed athletic trainer. I think we mean or as opposed to and. They both don't have to. I mean, it can be one or the other. And I guess then out of that flows the question as to who has been properly trained.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure whether it refers only to the licensed athletic trainer or does it also refer to the
It's both.
coach of intramural.
It's both.
It's both.
It's and. That's why it's and.
Okay, so a coach of everyone who's got this athletics and a licensed athletic trainer who has been properly, then it should be who have been properly trained.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in there, there's
Doesn't agree.
yeah.
Okay.
But only one. You don't have to have both there to administer. Only one.
They don't have to both be there at the same time.
It's either the coach
Right.
or the licensed athletic
Right.
trainer. It just it struck me as a little bit confusing as I read that.
Okay. We'll see if there's some way to, within the guidelines of the regs,
Yeah.
to tighten that up a little bit so it's less confusing.
And then also, if you could just give us a sense of when you say under general supervision of the school nurse, what does general supervision mean?
In regard to the training, or in regard to us doing the administration of medication?
In that particular paragraph, the last line.
I don't have that copy.
Such administration by the principal, any teacher, et cetera, shall be under the general supervision of the school nurse.
Well, all medication administration has to go through the nurse, whether it's for interscholastic sports or it's for a student in the classroom. That any medications brought into the school have to be registered with the nurse, and the medication plan has to be in the nursing office.
And this would be in the event of the absence of the school nurse during the school day, where the principal or the teachers, designates, OTPTs, paraprofessionals if requested, all of those listed qualifies. We would have been training them in the administration of medication in our absence.
Okay, so by general supervision, we're talking about the actual physical.
We would teach them how to do the medication administration.
And also
And Barbara manages the program.
Manages
the program in each building.
And then the last sentence of the entire policy, I'm not sure we mean what we say. And I'm just wondering whether it's a bit too broad and we don't need to say something like, so long as consistent with other policies and practices, nothing in these regulations prohibits parents or guardians from administering medication. I mean, I think there may be other places, other policies where we would.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay.
Where a parent might not be allowed to come into the school for some reason or
Right.
something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to capture that there.
Yes, that's fine.
And on the first page again, the word written order, is there a specific form that
Yes.
the doctor fills out, and that's the only one that you use? You won't take a fax or an email? Or,
Yes, we do take faxes.
as long as it's that form?
It doesn't have to be that form. It's a generic form that we tweaked for the Wilton school system, but we will accept something similar to that with the parents. We work with them. Some of them bring them from other school districts. They do a little bit of their own fine tuning. But as long as the same information is consistent on the form, we will accept it. But we can put our regular school form on the website for easy access.
And each year it has to be
It has to be
Updated.
renewed
Updated.
every year. It's now expanded to be a 12-month period. It used to expire the last day of the school year, and then it re-upped again in September. Now it extends through the ESY program so that they don't have to get two sets of medication
Oh.
orders for any students that are staying on through the summer program.
Just one other observation. If anybody wonders how schools are different today than they were, just read this policy.
Unbelievable. And
It's
if you look at
I mean, it
the
captures-
number of providers
Yeah,
that
I
can...
mean, it really does. I mean, it's a different world.
Yeah, it really is.
And this policy captures.
Right.
the-
I think
Good
that's
part.
really an important point. I think, not to put you on the spot, but the number, I was stunned when I was talking to one of the school nurses about the number of students, and it was in another district, at the high school level, or who were coming to the nursing station every day. Do you have a rough sense of how many?
We're seeing a lot more of the PRN meds that we're administering to the students. Those are the as-needed meds, not the routine daily meds, because now most of our daily meds have been time suspension, so we don't see as much as that for administration. But we do see them significantly, especially with our diabetic students coming in nonstop, and all of the asthmatics. We do have a lot of the allergy students as well coming in. So it's a constant accessing of the health office for med administration.
I know in this particular school, there's dozens every day, several dozens of kids.
Is there anything specific for special needs children, or does this cover
Same thing.
the same thing, the whole
Yes.
thing? How long do you need to maintain the documents? In the second to the last paragraph.
I believe it's 6 years. It's a retention of all of our regular health records. And then it's 3 years we have to do something with the control drug record. I'd have to go through that with the fine tooth comb again.
Yeah.
But
We're working
yes.
on that reg too.
Yes.
Is it safe to assume that you've moved to electronic retention enrollment?
Yes, thankfully,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Good.
Thanks to the lovely Board of Ed that borders the programs.
You want to see you going to the bat cave.
Next time we bring this back to you, we'll do it without the edits in it and clean it up and tighten, make sure we've done a review of all the language because of the repetition so many times of the providers and administrators. And so hopefully this will be a bit easier to read next time. And we'll look at those items that you pointed out.
Excellent. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks,
This is
Barb.
quite a lot of work.
That's good.
And now we'll move on to the action items. Policy 5131.2, bullying behavior.
The board may recall that you raised two questions in your review 2 weeks ago of the policy. The first was a question as to whether we should include school volunteers in the list of individuals who would be obligated to participate in training with the bullying policy and be obligated to report to the supervising teacher any issues of concern. Our reaction to that actually is to not recommend that take place. It's our feeling that volunteers are under the supervision of our certified staff. And in fact, the spirit of the law, the actual law states that the individuals, the school employees, if you will, who are obligated to participate in this training and become reporters, are in fact under contract. So that the recommendation is to not include that in the policy language. There may be an opportunity in the development of the school climate plans at each of the buildings to speak to the issue of volunteers and the obligation that we have as certified staff members to work with any of our volunteers to make sure that if they are indeed supporting supervision and working with students, that they would indeed be obligated to report issues of concern to those staff members who indeed are under their supervision. So I don't know if there's any further reflection or questions on that issue.
Well, I was the one who raised the issue. I'm thinking back, there have been instances where there are coaches who are volunteering. I'm thinking of the track team in particular, where a volunteer coach is out on the...
At this point, I'm sorry,
is
interrupting.
out on the field and is at practice and working with students. There's almost no discernible way to determine whether that he or she is a volunteer or a paid coach. As you watch them, they function as a coach in a sense. So I'm not sure. We wouldn't want those people to be mandatory reporters.
They are, there is in fact at this moment in time, there are not any volunteers either during the school day or outside of our school programs in extracurricular activities or interscholastic activities who are not working directly under the supervision of a school employee under contract. So it is indeed the responsibility of the certified staff member. If in your scenario there's a volunteer coach out on the track, if there was an issue of concern, it's still the certified staff member's responsibility to create an environment where reporting of those types of situations is in fact brought to their attention. And in fact, they need to follow through.
So to follow Dick's scenario through, if that volunteer coach sees something and brings it to that certified personnel, certified personnel will then report.
That certified personnel would in fact need to make a determination based on their training whether they need to report.
Okay.
And that's why I think we need to look closely at this issue within the school climate plans that we are obligated to develop at each of the schools. So that's the recommendation that I have in this regard as it relates to volunteers. I think The extent to which our volunteers are not employees, they're not under contract, and then would be under the policy mandated reporters, I think is not under the best advisement in terms of how we move forward. That responsibility needs to rest with the certified staff member who is responsible for that activity, or the individual who's under contract, a club advisor, for
Okay,
example.
I understand that, and I think that does make sense.
From a policy
Yeah,
standpoint.
no, it does make sense.
Right.
I think your point, though, about school climate, or the plan for school
That's
climate,
that
is a way to address
exactly. That's and that's that we
the
will
ambiguity of that issue.
we will take a good strong look at that. And as you know, we are obligated to have those school climate plans in place by January 1st, and we're going to have to be back in front of you in December for you to review those plans. So that will be a time where we can talk about that further.
And that'll be one for each school.
Correct. Right.
That's-
Although I think in the spirit of the legislation, I wouldn't anticipate significant differences in what those plans look like in each of the buildings. But there certainly will be some developmentally appropriate nuances that will have to be addressed specifically within those plans. I hope we have systemic and district-wide thinking about how we develop those plans and we're not working in isolation. The other issue was there was some concern about the reporting by the principal and or his administrative or her administrative team as it relates to the question of whether or not a particular incident requires police involvement. And I'm not recommending any policy language changes in that regard either. As we said that night upon further review as well, that it's our obligation as school administrators to take a good hard look at each incident that comes our way, and it's part of our obligation and responsibility if we have any concern about whether or not a potential crime has been committed to consult with Rich Ross, our school resource officer. Again, the point I'd like to make is if we have any concern, if there's any doubt, then we're going to consult and determine whether or not we're obligated under our responsibility as school administrators to report that to the police. So the policy in front of you has not changed since 2 weeks ago. It is, in fact, been vetted in great detail by our legal review team, and it's our recommendation that you hopefully approve the policy tonight. I'll be glad to take any further questions.
Ryan,
I make a motion to approve it.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that is all for action items. The timeline. I went through that at the beginning. I don't think there are any changes at all. And so the next meeting will be here on the 28th at 7 o'clock.
The agenda says 27.
So 27th at 7 o'clock.
Mr. Gray, if I may.
Yes.
I just want to alert the board that as part of your information items in today's packet, you will find a wide range of summer curriculum projects, the summary abstracts that were completed over the summer by our teachers. It really is a wide-ranging and significant, high-quality package of work for your review. And also wanted to publicly acknowledge the Wilton Education Foundation for their efforts to fund a wide range of professional development opportunities through their institute, which your packets also contain a summary thereof. So just public acknowledgement and a great extension of gratitude to the Wilton Education Foundation for funding a wide range of professional development opportunities for our staff.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. I know it's really very interesting when you get into the details of some of the personal comments on those. They're fascinating.
As appropriate, is it safe to assume we can put some of that information up on the website for people to see?
There's quite a bit of there's like
I'm sorry.
It was about 60 pages of information.
it's a lot.
My understanding is we do post the summer curriculum work that's done internally through our process, and then we count on the Wilton Education Foundation. They do a great job of publicizing So
They're
their
probably
efforts, the work
wanting to.
was supported by their group.
And I think they'll be probably, Bruce, working with us. They'll want some language to use in their various ways, in their appeals and in their website. So
I just think it's valuable for the community to see.
See what,
all the good work
how it's
done.
being used, yeah. There's a lot there, and we can certainly get a lot out of it.
We do thank them.
Good. At this time, we ask any members of the public that have an interest in speaking before the board to come forward now. Seeing none, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
No. So
Joe,